the November edition of How Not to Burn Toast. This month we're going to be talking about Thanksgiving dinner for beginners, or we're doing Thanksgiving Throwdown. Our idea behind this special is that many of us may be cooking Thanksgiving dinner for the very first time, and I got really distracted. I got so distracted. I would like push through it.
I was like, oh God, how am I gonna?
Okay.
Luckily, it's at the very beginning. You can just start over.
I know. Our idea behind this program is our idea behind making this episode of How Not to Burn Toast was the idea that a lot of us may be making Thanksgiving dinner for the very first time because we're not traveling for Thanksgiving because of the coronavirus. You may not be going to a big family Thanksgiving this year, or even be gathering with many people in Boulder City this year either. So we're going to give a whole bunch of different recipe ideas, some basics for making Thanksgiving dinner, and some tips and tricks to help you if this is your first time or if you're just a beginner at Thanksgiving dinner.
Yep, and we'll be doing videos that cover everything from making a turkey to making dessert.
Yep.
And hopefully you might try some of our recipes and let us know how they went. We're both, I think, doing Thanksgiving. I do a Friendsgiving every year. I've been cooking Thanksgiving since I was like real little, and it's one of my favorite holidays. It is my favorite holiday. We'll just go with that. So I'm really excited to be doing this.
Yeah, definitely. So, some of the biggest things that you need to think about is, what do you need to know when cooking Thanksgiving dinner for the first time? What do you have to plan for? What do you have to grocery shop for? So we'll be talking about these things in our individual videos when we're prepping things, but also now too.
Right. So you can start grocery shopping a long time ahead of time. Right now, I went to Vaughn's yesterday and picked up a turkey for this video. So turkeys are already out if you're looking for a frozen turkey. If you're looking for fresh turkey, you obviously need to wait until a few days before, because it can't sit in your fridge for a month.
Yes.
I think 4 days at the most, to be real honest, if it's a fresh turkey.
Yeah.
But you can pre-order fresh turkeys from like Sprouts and Whole Foods. I've gotten them both from there, and they've both been excellent. You can also just get turkey breasts, and those mostly come frozen.
Yeah.
So those you can pick up ahead of time. You can start stockpiling all your paper goods, all of that kind of fun stuff, because let me tell you, using paper plates, always the best idea.
Yep.
Because you don't have to wash them.
Regardless of how big or small your Thanksgiving dinner is going to be, paper plates are definitely the way to go.
Right.
But I do want to backtrack to what you said before. So you can order a fresh turkey, but most turkeys are frozen when you buy them. So one of the biggest things that you don't want to forget is to defrost your turkey. So we did talk a lot about freezing in one of our previous episodes of How Not to Burn Toast. But for Thanksgiving turkey specifically, you'll want to take it from the freezer and put it into the fridge, I think about like 5 or 6 days before Thanksgiving.
It really depends on how big your turkey is, and there are guides on how many hours it takes per pound. So most turkeys are like 14 plus pounds now. You don't find the little turkeys anymore. They're huge. And those will take 5 to 6 days in your fridge, and that is the best way to thaw them. You can do a cold water method, and I do this often with turkey breasts, because fitting a whole turkey into like your sink is pretty much impossible anymore. So that's the whole, you do this with a lot of meats and stuff. You put them in cold water, make sure it's cold water, and you have to change the water every half an hour to an hour. So it still takes quite a bit of time to thaw a turkey.
And I found a really great article about like different ways to thaw your turkey, but if you are going for, I'll leave that down below in the description box when we compile our list of different links for you guys. But when you do the cold water method, if this is the day before Thanksgiving, you will have to babysit your turkey for like 7 hours.
Right.
Because you'll have to watch the cold water, make sure that the water isn't warming up too much, because you don't want bacteria growing on the outside of your turkey as it defrosts. So definitely keep in mind the defrosting process for your turkey.
Yes. And then for most of your other foods, you can buy your canned goods at any time. when they go on sale, a lot of canned goods like canned pumpkin and stuff like that go on sale after Thanksgiving, and they last for like a couple of years.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so you can stockpile right after Thanksgiving for a lot of that stuff. And plus, pumpkin is good.
Oh yeah.
We should eat it more.
Or if you're like my family and just do a second Thanksgiving dinner for Christmas, you can just stockpile and buy all of the stuff on discount after Thanksgiving for your
Right.
Christmas Thanksgiving.
Exactly. I normally buy an extra turkey or two so that when I feel like I want Thanksgiving again, I can just have it. But your potatoes, your Brussels sprouts, your green beans, I mean, if you're going to use canned green beans, that's a little bit different. We're going to talk about fresh green beans.
Yes.
And then various other things like bread and stuff that can go bad. A lot of times you can freeze them ahead of time, even the raw ingredients. But my big tip is if you're making Thanksgiving for people, look for the shortcuts that you can find. So like at Albertsons, you can buy a mixture of onions and celery, which you use in a lot of things actually for $1.99. Already pre-cut. Great. Don't have to do all that chopping and stuff like that. You can find peeled butternut squash because I love butternut squash. It is a pain in the butt to peel.
And a kitchen hazard if you've never tried to peel one.
Right. Or your knife is not sharp.
Yeah.
So you can do that kind of stuff. You can buy some of this stuff frozen. And that there's a lot of good store stuff out there.
Yes.
We always preach, make it yourself if you can.
Yes.
If you don't have time to make your pie crust, buy one. You don't have time to make your pies, Costco has some good pumpkin pies.
Yep.
Trader Joe's has a good pumpkin pie cheesecake, let me tell you. Go out there and buy that kind of stuff because you shouldn't stress over this kind, especially right now.
Oh yeah.
We have enough stress. Don't stress over your Thanksgiving meal.
Because also, like, the main idea of Thanksgiving is just to get together with your loved ones and hopefully not be stressed and have a nice meal together.
Yes,
So
eat all the food.
So try to make it as easy on yourself as possible.
So what can you do ahead of time? You can do almost everything ahead of time except for like your final baking.
Yeah.
Obviously, because you want your food to be warm.
Yep.
Unless it's supposed to be cold, then you want it cold.
Yep.
So you can make sides like your stuffing, your green bean casseroles, your mashed potatoes, all ahead of time, even weeks ahead of time, and freeze them. I freeze mashed potatoes all the time because there are some days you just need mashed potatoes. I can freeze the stuffing, and you can freeze your leftovers too. This goes both ways. You can make your pies ahead of time. You can freeze most pies, including things like apple pie, which most of us don't think about for Thanksgiving, but it is a big fall thing. So yeah, apple pie. Like I said, stuffing. Your gravy you can freeze ahead of time. You can also make it the night before. I know a lot of people want that turkey flavor in there. Buy turkey stock, and you've got that flavor already. Because gravy can go horribly wrong.
That too.
I have horribly wrong gravy many times. So it's easier just to make it ahead of time and warm it up. And that's where crock pots and all of these other like warming devices come in handy.
Definitely. So we wanted to talk about the importance of helping hands in your Thanksgiving kitchen. So Sam is of the variety that she likes to do most things on her own.
Get out of my kitchen.
But normally, although my family Thanksgiving will be much smaller this year, we have maybe 5 adults in the kitchen at once.
Wow.
In my grandma's very tiny little kitchen at once. Someone may be doing the dishes, someone may be chopping vegetables for prep work, someone may be like checking times on the ovens or putting together some other dish or something like that. But depending on the size of your Thanksgiving, you may want to enroll a couple of helpers, but that doesn't mean that that you kind of dictate all of the different things. Like maybe someone just does small tasks for you and you're kind of the manager of the Thanksgiving extravaganza.
Don't micromanage.
Don't micromanage, but if you need help with some dishes as like you clean as you go, you can have someone help you with that. Another really good idea is to have a potluck Thanksgiving too. So if you're having a large Thanksgiving or even a small one, maybe you could ask a few of your friends or family members like, hey, will you bring a side dish or like a fresh salad or something like that to help kind of relieve some of the burden of cooking a whole like 15 course meal for all of your friends and family.
Yeah, and this year, I know you have to be a little more careful. Make sure that people are already inside your bubble.
Yes.
Because we don't want anyone getting sick.
Yep.
But yeah, my family's always did like for the big families potlucks.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have, the regular stuff and then a giant table of dessert. So that's what I always remember about Thanksgiving, and I always went to a couple of them. So Thanksgiving dessert just doesn't have to be pumpkin pie.
Yep.
So remember that
It
too.
could be anything.
It can pretty much be anything.
Mhm.
If it tastes good, you can eat it at Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
So time management. We're gonna link something that kind of has like a guide on how you can start prepping, a couple weeks ahead of time, all the way down to the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
I'm notorious for not being on time. So like I'll tell my friends that we're gonna eat at 2. It will probably end up being around 3 because things don't always go as planned.
Mm-hmm.
You run out of oven space, and that's something you're gonna have to really. It's very precious at Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Because your turkey needs to go in the oven, your stuffings need to go in the oven, this, that, and all the other things. If you have friends with roasters, crock pots, ones that are willing to let you use their ovens and then they bring the stuff over, that's all the kinds of things you can do. I actually have one of those double ovens, and it comes in really handy around Thanksgiving. I also have a turkey roaster. I have a lot of weird things that most people don't have. They all come in handy, and sometimes we don't think about like the crock pot to cook a turkey breast.
Mm-hmm.
My mom used to do it all the time growing up. We actually had Thanksgiving once a month. It was great. So we used crock pots. Crock pots can heat up your mashed potatoes instead of your stovetop.
Yeah.
Because all of that real estate is going to be very precious, especially your fridge. Clean it out before Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh, number of guests. That's always the good one. The question, I think, like the Butterball hotline, they have a hotline for Thanksgiving to ask all of your turkey questions.
The Turkey Talk hotline.
Yes. One of the questions they get all the time is how much? How much should I get? And like I said earlier, turkeys are huge. Like huge nowadays, and I think most of us will probably be cooking for 8 or less people.
Yeah.
So,
or at least we should be. Hopefully.
So they normally say 1 pound of turkey per person. If you want leftovers, 1.5 pounds. Yeah. Because it's counting the bones and all the stuff that you can't eat too. You can make them into good food, but you normally don't eat those right away. So for most people, a 14 to 16 pound turkey will be more than enough. If there's just 2 of you and you don't like dark meat, buy a turkey breast. You don't need the whole thing. If you do like dark meat, you can find leg quarters out there.
If you don't like turkey, just get a roasted chicken.
Right. Actually, that's a really good idea. If you don't like turkey, get an alternative.
Yeah.
There's really cool pork roasts out there where you can butterfly them and stuff them with stuffing and cranberries.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
tasty. You can make a chicken if you really like chicken. Yeah. Make whatever you want. You gotta eat it. Or you might as well make things you want.
Definitely.
Okay.
All
What are
right.
you serving?
So some different tips for serving we already talked about. Crock pots and turkey roasters and other things of that nature can be really helpful to keep everything warm before you serve it to everybody. Another thing that's really important to think about is having different plates and cups and silverware. If you're not buying, big spoons too. If you're not buying like paper plates or paper cups, you want to make sure that you have enough of those in your home. I know my husband and I, we only have 6 plates, so our dinner parties can only go to 6 people unless other people use bowls for their meals. So just keep in mind what you have on hand, if you have enough plates for everybody, but also paper plates are the way to go
Right.
because it cuts down on your dishes because
And
you
you-
definitely have enough.
And you can get really cute ones that are Thanksgiving themed and everything.
Yes.
So I mean, I'm notorious. I don't like to do dishes. So any way I can cut down on those because I make a glorious mess when I do large meals. Because I need to use every pot I own. Yep. My sister says, "Hi Emily." My sister says I own too many pots and pans, which I probably do because I can go for a while without actually cleaning some of them.
But she uses every single one.
I
on
use them
Thanksgiving.
all at Thanksgiving. I mean, all my serveware, everything, and ask people to bring serveware.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason that you need to go out and buy a giant platter if someone else has a giant platter.
Yes.
Like Sam.
Mm-hmm.
I have giant platters.
Another thing that might be good for people to bring is you could ask your friends and family, hey, maybe bring your own Tupperware to take home some.
Super good idea.
There was one year so my family Thanksgiving is always in Utah with my grandparents, and I lived in the same town as them when I went to college. And they cracked up because I brought all of my Tupperware with me to Thanksgiving so that I could stock up and take it back to college with me.
Yeah.
So bringing your own Tupperware, that means that if you you never have to do the dance of whose Tupperware is this to get it back to whoever, or you can get easy disposable Tupperwares off of Amazon. Sam has some that she really loves, and we can link those down below. But definitely have a plan for all of the leftovers because you don't want all of them to stay at your house. You definitely want some of your guests to leave with some.
So here, we're going to insert all of the food videos.
Yes, here we go.
So I'm going to be going over how to make a turkey breast in a crock pot. Most Americans like white meat, so that's the turkey breast. So we're going to show you how to not take up space in your precious oven. We're going to go over a stuffing dressing depending on where you're from. This is my family's recipe of throw everything in here. So you're going to probably hear me talking with weird measurements and stuff like that. I'll try to put in some better ones other than shake half the canister into the stuffing.
Very Midwestern.
It's very Midwestern. I learned to cook from both of my grandmas, so I cook like a grandma sometimes. They just, after a while, you just know it's right if you've made it enough. I'll also be making my diet unfriendly mashed potatoes. Very tasty, diet unfriendly. And I'll go over gravy too. So that's like your crazy Midwestern carby stuff. And then Kayley is gonna do sides and your breads.
Yep.
And your dessert.
Yep. So I'll be going over a quick homemade biscuit recipe, a very fresh green bean casserole recipe without canned green beans. It'll be with fresh green beans. Some different ways to roast vegetables. I'll be highlighting Brussels sprouts and squash, but you could use any vegetables that you like. And then I will be showing you how to make a pumpkin and an apple pie with a homemade crust or with a store-bought crust. So you have options there. So this is definitely, Thanksgiving is a place for you to cut corners. So if you use a store-bought crust, that is totally fine.
I make my own crust, but you can also freeze them too. So if you want to make them ahead of time, you can do the same thing the store does and put them in a disposable pan and freeze them. Very good tip. So enjoy all the food!
Here's Sam with her Thanksgiving turkey.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another part of How Not to Burn Toast, the Thanksgiving Throwdown. Today, I'm going to be teaching you how to make a turkey breast in the crock pot and stuffing and mashed potatoes and gravy. So we're going to be going over a lot of stuff today, but it's pretty simple. So let's get started. So what I have here is a formerly frozen turkey breast. If you're not feeding a ton of people, these are great to have because most Americans tend to like white meat as it is. They're fairly small in comparison to a 14-pound massive turkey that is bigger than my cutting board. and they're really easy to cook, and you can cook them in a lot of different ways. And today we're doing the crock pot because we don't tend to have a lot of oven space when it comes to Thanksgiving. So first thing you want to do is thaw your turkey breast. And that's going to even take a couple of days. Turkeys take even longer because they're obviously bigger. So I bought mine Thursday night, and it's been a couple of days. So you can see it's all thawed now. So now we're going to add and make some seasoning to put on this before we put it in the crock pot. So right here, if you can see that, I have butter because butter makes everything better. And then I have my seasoning mix. And my seasoning mix happens to be poultry seasoning, which has a ton of different, what we consider Thanksgiving flavors in it, some extra thyme in there, and then seasoning salt to add paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, and salt all in one. So I'm actually going to make a compound butter by dumping all of that into my butter and mixing it around. And this is going to allow the seasoning to go under the turkey skin pretty easily, and it will add some moistness and flavor to the turkey that normally wouldn't get in places. So I'm actually going to lift up my turkey breast skin and get my fingers under there. You're going to have to work at separating the skin a little bit from the breast, and you'll notice the little temperature gauge, which is pretty much useless, is still in there. Don't take that out because then you've just created a hole for juices to come out in your turkey. So I'm separating my skin a little bit, and then we're going to massage that butter down in there to get flavor directly onto the breast. And I know if you don't like touching meats, this is not the most appetizing things in the world. You can wear gloves to do this. And then we're going to get the outside too, because it will get flavor throughout the whole thing. And you can come up this way and get under the skin too. So bear with me, this takes a few minutes. And it's messy. It's better if your turkey is semi-dry, so take some paper towel to it and don't forget to throw those away. Get in the cavity too. And that was a whole stick of butter, so this will be tasty. Don't forget to wash your hands. Sanitation is always good. We're going to take this with us. Okay, now our turkey breast is all ready to go into our crock pot. This is a large, I call them large crock pots, 6 to 8 quart crock pot. And inside I put in some aromatics to help give some more flavor to the turkey breast. So there's just a couple of carrots in here, some celery, and an onion. So you just literally pick up your turkey breast and plop it into. Ta-da! Don't forget to spray your turkey breast or your crock pot with no stick spray so that it makes for easy cleanup. This is kind of messy. I gotta wash my hands a couple times. No salmonella for us. And then all we do is put our top on our crock pot. And if your top's not quite fitting right on there, mine is just barely sealing on my 6-pound turkey breast. You can put foil over it and then put the top on it. It will shrink as it cooks. And I'm just gonna plug this in, put it on low. And move it off to the side because I am all done with my turkey for 6 hours. So don't forget to clean up. You've just put turkey on here. But then we will move on to making our stuffing and our mashed potatoes. So we'll be right back. Okay, we're back and we're going to be working on stuffing. So this is, I guess, my family recipe. It's really super simple and everyone always asks for it, and I really don't have a recipe for it, but I'm going to try to make one for you guys. But it starts with bread. This is just regular old store-bought white bread. It's a whole loaf, and I have just kind of crumbled it up. A lot of places will tell you to use either like day-old bread or, you know, the like really dry crumbs. I've always made it like this and it turns out great, so either or will work. We're also melting some butter on our fancy dancy induction burner, and that is for the liquid that we're going to be putting over the bread to make the stuffing. Now I like to use both onions and celery in my stuffings. Not everyone does. That's all I use in them. You can put in other things too, but I like to saute mine first. And look, I'm 100% cheating. These are store-cut onions, because if you can take some shortcuts, it's great, because you don't want Thanksgiving to be stressful. So store-cut onions and celery, and I'm just going to saute them for a few minutes to get them a little soft so you don't get too much of a crunch in your stuffing. Sorry for the fan, that's just the way this burner works. But we're just going to saute these for a minute or two. And while that's working, I'm going to move this over to the side and put my bread on focus. So, like I said, mine is really, really super simple. I just use a few spices in mine, mainly poultry seasoning. Poultry seasoning, let's see what they say they have in them. Thyme, sage, marjoram, rosemary, black pepper, and nutmeg. You can make your own blend if you want, and I don't measure this. I'm going to try to come up with measurements for you guys. I just tend to pour until my bread looks like it's all covered. And I actually bought extra because I was using this in my turkey too, and my family likes a lot of the poultry seasoning, so I grew up learning to put a lot on there from my mom and my grandma's. My one grandma, I remember, she used to put sausage and sometimes apples in her stuffing, and if you like that, more power to you. I just like this kind of super simple stuffing. So that looks about right to me. It's about 3/4 of one of these containers normally. And I'll taste it to make sure it tastes good. I also like to put in a couple of teaspoons of garlic powder and onion powder to boost those flavors. About 2 teaspoons of garlic powder and a teaspoon of onion powder. That's where mine differs a little from the classic family recipe. But I love both garlic and onions because garlic and onions. So now I'm going to take my butter and my semi-soft. And remember, these are hot. I used to always stir this with my hands, and then I realized how kind of dumb that was after I burnt myself a few times. So I'm just using my little spatula. And then you can add whatever broth you want to use. And why I say that is because this is super easy to make vegetarian. Just use vegetable stock. You can, if you don't want dairy in there, just use olive oil instead of butter. Super easy for your vegetarian friends. Now I'm using turkey stock because Thanksgiving. And you want to wet this down pretty decently. I'm going to put some in and then stir it around. See how it goes. I like my stuffing, dressing, whatever you want to call it, pretty moist. So I end up normally putting almost a whole carton in here. Do, do, do. Stirring it around, making sure it gets in there. Good. That is probably good. I'm actually going to taste this, and there's nothing in here that could harm you. Good. My seasoning's all good. And there's still a little bit of crunch left to the vegetables, so they won't be mushy. Now I'm going to put this in one of my casserole pans. You can put it into any kind of baking dish. If you're freezing this, I recommend putting it in a disposable baking dish. If you're going to take it somewhere, put it in a disposable baking dish so that you don't have to remember to take your Tupperware home. I'm just spraying this because I don't want it to stick. And we're going to put this all in here. Get that in there. And there you go. That's Sam's super simple stuffing. I bake it on either 350, 375, higher temperature for about a half an hour, a lower temperature for 45 minutes to an hour. I like to have my Crispies on top. And then you can serve it with your turkey. It's really good the next day. I like to make this the night before, let it sit in my fridge overnight so that the flavors kind of meld together. So we'll bake off the stuffing and we'll show it with our finished turkey in about 6 hours. Yay! Okay, now we're moving on to one of my favorite foods. It's my main comfort food. Potatoes! We're going to be doing a classic mashed potatoes. I call it classic not good for you mashed potatoes because it has butter, sour cream, and milk in it. This is Thanksgiving. This is not diet time. So I don't use russet potatoes, you know, the big baking potatoes that always kind of look like they're dirty. I use gold potatoes whenever I make mashed potatoes. In fact, I use gold potatoes for most things. So gold, or some people call them yellow, Dutch yellow. These are kind of an in-between potato. Russets tend to be mealy and fall apart, great for baked potatoes. I don't think they actually make that good of mashed potatoes. And then on the other hand, you have your red potatoes, which are great roasting potatoes because they're waxy, really, really waxy, but they don't make the best mashed potatoes. Now these are kind of a hybrid of those two. So they make extremely good mashed potatoes because you get kind of the good parts of both of the other types of potatoes. Now I just use a pot of water, quarter my potatoes, unless they're really small, and then you can just half them. Because if you put them in whole, they're going to take forever to cook. And we don't want forever. Forever is much too long. So I can't remember how big my bag was. I'm doing a, 3-pound bag of potatoes right now. If you have 4 to 6 people, that should be enough. I'm not having 4 to 6 people right now, but I like to freeze mashed potatoes for those days that you just need some of that comfort in your life. They freeze really well. Some people will say they don't. I've never had any problems with my potatoes freezing, and I just reheat them in the microwave with a little extra milk and butter. And they work just fine. And they're great for when you want a quick side dish too. So I make a ton of mashed potatoes at Thanksgiving, and they go in my freezer. So this is one of the ones that you can make way ahead of time, and then you can stick in your freezer. But we're not doing that today. We're gonna learn how to actually make them. And if you have a really large potato, you might have to cut it into 6. You want all of them to be the same size so they cook at the same time. And if you lose one, don't forget to throw it away. And I'm gonna dump some water out of my pot. You only really need enough water to cover the potatoes. And then I'm going to show you something that I learned a little bit later on in life, despite the fact I've been cooking Thanksgiving for quite a long time. So when we make pasta, one of the things they always tell you to do is salt your water. Same goes for potatoes. Potatoes are sponges and they pick up flavors. So if you salt your water now, it's gonna get throughout the potatoes. So I salt my water, and sometimes I don't even have to add salt to my potatoes after I have mashed them. So it's a really good tip that most people don't think about. So we're gonna bring these to a low boil, so just over a simmer, for about 15 to 20 minutes until they're fork tender. And then we'll move on to mashing. Okay, so my potatoes are all boiled, so now we're going to make super yummy mashed potatoes. So there's a bunch of different ways you can mash your potatoes. You can go old school on them with a potato masher, you know, the medieval looking device. You can put them in your mixer or a hand mixer and beat them that way. Do not put them in a blender or in a food processor, because you will make library paste. And despite the fact we are a library paste does not taste good. It's real gluey. So I don't use, well, I use the masher sometimes, but you'll notice that I left all of my peels on my potatoes because I hate peeling potatoes, but I don't like the peels in my mashed potatoes. I want that real nice, smooth potato-ness. So I use something called a potato ricer. And I got this one years ago from IKEA. It is literally, if you've ever had a garlic press, it's a giant garlic press. So there's little holes the potato comes out of, and it catches all of the skins in here. So I don't have to skin those potatoes, peel the potatoes. So this is what I use. It also breaks up the potato in a way that makes it real light and fluffy. So you don't have to add as much dairy to make those potatoes really light and fluffy. So if you're have a dairy allergy, like my niece, hi Ellie, you can use things like chicken stock or other dairy substitutes that may not quite have the fattiness that dairy has, but it won't matter because your potatoes are already nice, light, and fluffy from the potato ricer. So to use a potato ricer, it's really super simple. You put the potatoes in, you put down the little plunger, and you press into your bowl. After a while, you are going to have to get the skins out because they will clog the bottom. And this can take a while, so if you're doing like 10 or so pounds of potatoes, I recommend using your big mixer, because let me tell you, the mixers are heaven sent when you have to do large batches of potatoes. Growing up, we had to do huge patches of potatoes for some of our family things because there were like 40 people there. So you're doing giant batches of potatoes. So I always was using a hand mixer, and we used to use a automatic potato peeler too, which also made that super simple. So we're just going to keep ricing these potatoes, and you can see how it kind of looks a little bit like rice down in the bottom of my bowl, and I keep dropping potato in there with my big spoon. And my dogs like this too, because I tend to sometimes overshoot the bowl and then they get to lick up the mess. So I'm gonna de-potato skin my thing just a little bit. And yes, it is a little hot, but I sometimes think they don't have any nerve endings left in my fingers from cooking for a really long time. So I tend to manhandle a lot of hot things that I shouldn't. So we're gonna just keep ricing. If you like to make gnocchi, potato ricer is a good way to go for making the potatoes nice and light and fluffy for making gnocchi too. Just a couple more handfuls. Whoop. See, my dog just came running. Gotta get the skins off. And if you skin your potatoes, obviously this will go a lot faster. And a little bit less messy. I really hate, really hate peeling potatoes. I mean, you can leave the skins on too if you want. I just don't really care for them. One more handful. Okay. Clean up a little bit right here. So there are all my nicely riced potatoes. And you see they kind of already look real light and fluffy. So like I said, you don't have to add that much dairy anymore. But we're going to. So this is just melted butter. An entire stick of butter. And a little bit of milk. And you can see they already kind of look like nice mashed potatoes. But we're not done. So my secret weapon, and my sister always asks me, everyone always loves your mashed potatoes. What do you do to make them taste so good? I make them unhealthy. I add a couple of big nice spoonfuls of sour cream. It adds a tanginess that you can't get with milk. You could probably try to use buttermilk too, but sour cream is something that I always have on hand. Now, the bad thing about sour cream is you can't really heat it up, so you may need to heat up your mashed potatoes a little bit. After this, you can pop them in the microwave for a few minutes, or if you need to hold them, you can put them in a crock pot and put it on warm and stir it every once in a while. You may have to add some dairy every once in a while depending on how long you're going to hold them this way. But that's it. That's mashed potatoes. I put a little pepper in mine. If you don't want to see the black flecks in there, use a white pepper. You can also add Parmesan cheese, cheddar cheese, bacon bits, anything your heart really desires into mashed potatoes. They are so good for taking flavor. So I'm going to taste this because you notice I didn't put any salt in it yet because I salted my potatoes. It needs just a pinch of salt. Just a little tiny pinch. My butter was also salted. I cook primarily with salted butter, even when I asked for unsalted. I just remembered to pull back on the salt that's in the rest of the recipes. And there are your mashed potatoes. Look at them. So good. Light and fluffy. So you can make these the night before, even a couple of days before. And like I said, things tend to age well when they're all mixed up. So just put them in your fridge for a little while or freeze them. And there you have your mashed potatoes. Okay, so our next little bit is going to be to work on the gravy. Now we're just making a simple pan gravy here. So I use drippings for it. So this is some of the fat that came out of my turkey. But I only had about a tablespoon, and I need about 4 tablespoons to make this gravy, to make about 2 cups. So I add butter to make up the rest of that. And now I just have to wait until it melts. My butter was already at room temperature, so hopefully it won't take that long to melt. And now roux is what I grew up learning, or flour slurry, to make gravy with. Some people make them with cornstarch. You can do that too, but we're going to go with the roux method today because you can use roux to thicken a lot of things. So let's let this butter melt. And I am using whisks, and since this is a non-stick pan, I'm using a coated whisk so that it doesn't cause any problems. Okay, now that my butter's almost melted, we're going to add in an equal amount of flour. This is just regular all-purpose flour, and I'm whisking to incorporate it and to try to get the lumps out of it before lumpies happen. And what you're looking for is a smooth paste. And you want to cook this for a few minutes because you want to cook the raw flavor of the flour out. Roux are used to thicken a lot of things like gumbo and stuff like that. And the darker the roux, the less binding power it has. So we're going for a blonde roux. So it only needs to cook for a couple of minutes. I'm actually going to turn my thing down. So this should make about 2 cups of gravy. So I have 2 cups of stock here, and there's a little bit of fat still on it. I got most of it off. You can buy a fat separator that really helps with that, but I don't have one anymore. I broke it. So this is 2 cups of stock. I had about 1.5 cups from my turkey and about 1 cup of store-bought. So I'm going to pour this in while I'm whisking to incorporate it. And if you do it while you're whisking and you do it slowly enough, not dump it all in, that's how you keep lumps from happening. Though my mom always told me that lumps meant it was homemade. Okay. So now we want it to heat up so that the flour will gelatinize and make my gravy thick. So I turned up my temperature again a little bit. You notice I haven't added any seasoning to this yet. Once it thickens up, I'll give it a taste because it has some of the seasoning from the turkey in there already. And you can make these kind of gravies into vegetarian too. Just obviously don't use the drippings. Use either butter or olive oil if you're going vegan, and then you could use a vegetable stock, or you could make a miso broth, or a miso mushroom broth is actually really good to make gravy with. So we need our gravy to cook until it's thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. So that will take a few minutes. And this is the same if you were going to make beef dripping gravy or chicken dripping gravy. Same recipe. Starting to thicken up. I can feel it. Now if you screw up and can't get it to thicken up the way you want, you can take some of the hot liquid and add some cornstarch in, and then pour it in here, and that will help tighten your gravy. I've had to do that many times. Gravy is one of those things that is really easy to screw up. And you don't want it so thick that you can stand your whisk up in it either. So let's see. So see how when I coat the spoon and I tip it, I put my finger through it, it's still coming down a little. It means it can be a little thicker. It's starting to bubble. Turn it down a little bit. These induction burners get hot real fast. Okay, let's try this again. And that's right there what we're looking for. So now I'm going to taste the seasoning. Could use a little salt, some pepper. Always season after you've reduced it, because otherwise it will get too seasoned. And there you go. That is a simple drippings pan gravy. And I recommend putting it into something with a spout in it. So if you have a gravy boat, use your gravy boat. I'm just putting it back in to my measuring cup. And then we're going to move this out of the way so we can show off what we made today. Yay! So we have our gravy all ready to go. My turkey is actually ready. It's still in the crock pot, but here we go. We have stuffing fresh out of the oven. And then last but not least, we learned mashed potatoes. So this is your basic, big ones for your Thanksgiving meal. Kayley's gonna help you with some sides and some desserts, and we hope that you're able to put together a good Thanksgiving meal this year. So happy Thanksgiving, and if you have any questions, send us a chat through our Facebook or our Twitter, or you can give us a call at the library, or use our questions form on the library website. See ya!
Portion of this video, Sam already showed us how to make a third portion of this video, Sam already showed us how to make a Thanksgiving turkey, stuffing, and mashed potatoes and gravy, and now we're going to talk about some of the side dishes that you can have for an easy Thanksgiving dinner. So the recipes that I'm going to cover with my wonderful husband Austin are biscuits, green bean casserole, some roasted vegetables, and then 2 different versions of pie. We'll be doing a pumpkin pie and an apple pie. So to start out, we're going to just dive on into Austin's biscuit recipe.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about it just a little bit?
Sure. So yeah, this is just a pretty easy, simple biscuit recipe. It's just got flour, baking powder, sugar, butter, milk, and that's really it. So
This rendition of the recipe will make 6 large fluffy biscuits, but normally he doubles it for 12.
Yes.
We'll be making 6 tonight, and then this recipe will also be linked down in the description below, along with all of those easy Thanksgiving links that we talked about in the first portion of the video. All right, so what do we do first?
So we're going to start out by measuring out our dry ingredients. We're going to do 2 cups of all-purpose flour, just to get us started. Always combine the dry ingredients before the wet ingredients. We're also going to add 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and this recipe also calls for a teaspoon of salt, but we're not going to use that since we're using salted butter instead of unsalted butter. Now at this stage, we're just going to stir everything up with our wooden spatula to make sure everything is nice and evenly mixed. And then we can get to the butter part. So with the butter, we're going to be using 3/4 of a stick or 6 tablespoons of a stick of butter. To incorporate this into the mixture, we're going to want it to be frozen first. Very important is getting the cold butter into our biscuit recipe. What I'm going to do for this, in order to get it into the small pieces, is I'm just going to actually mark it so I know when to stop. And then I'm going to grate it all the way down so I have 3/4 a stick of really small, really cold butter.
All right.
Now I'm doing this. What do we have the oven set at, sweetie? 425?
Yes, we have the oven set at 425. And I have already prepared a non-stick baking sheet for us that has some wax paper down on top of it. And this helps for cleanup later. So Austin, why do you like these biscuits so much?
Well, I like these biscuits so much, well, because they're so easy, and because they always turn out really well. Just surprisingly, every time I make them, no matter if I mess up, it's hard to go wrong with butter, flour, milk, and sugar, because it's so simple of a recipe. It's a little difficult to actually get wrong. So it's a nice beginner biscuit recipe. That's what I like about it.
Yeah.
It's actually my first biscuit recipe that I ever did.
We make a lot of quick breads in our house.
Yes, we do.
We don't do a lot of waiting for things to rise. So these are really easy for a beginner.
Yeah, exactly. So that's about, I would say, 3/4 a cup or 3/4 of a stick of butter. We're just going to kind of get that evenly incorporated throughout. This I like to use my fingers for, because with this, you're going to kind of pinch very lightly just to get it to get like almost wet or dry sand, like slightly moist sand consistency. And you can also use a blender or food processor because we want to keep it as cold as possible.
We don't have one of those.
But we don't have one, so we're just using our hands. I'd say that's about there. It holds its texture a little bit when clumped together, and that's how you know we're ready to add the milk. So for our milk, we're going to do 3/4 of a cup of any type of milk.
And he said 3/4 of a cup of any type of milk in case the audio.
We have 2%. I like to use buttermilk myself. I can also use whole milk, or I've done this recipe with almond milk before. Perfect. And also, make sure it's
Slowly?
cold. Just pour it all on in. What we're going to do is very gently and slowly incorporate this, because we're not trying to knead the batter. We're just trying to mix it together. When you knead a batter, it actually makes it tougher. And because we want our biscuits to be tender, we're not going to do any kneading for this. So while I am mixing this together, would you sprinkle out a little bit of flour onto my workstation?
I will.
Thank you.
Is that good?
That's perfect. As you can see, I'm just barely working it until it'll hold together, because I don't want to actually knead it at all. So, you kind of get all these scraps out of here, press them together, and this is where we're at now. So, we're just going to want to, because we don't have a biscuit cutter, and I like using all of the dough that I make You can see it's really tender, how it's almost breaking apart. That's exactly what we want. Now here, because we're gonna make about 6 biscuits out of this, we wanna make them all even. You're gonna use a knife, you can also use a pizza cutter to get them nice, clean lines, even and separate. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 6 total biscuits, right? And these, because they're so delicate and tender, we're going to want to help them off of the bench a little bit. Right. And these are going to go into the oven for, let's see, how long do we put them in there? 12 minutes. So they're really quick ones too. You're going to want to give them ample space in between so that they can rise straight up. Right.
So,
Perfect.
so you could see the prep time for those was like 5 to 10 minutes, and then they're going to go in for 12 minutes, so they're really quick.
Peter?
All right, and then once those come out of the oven, we'll show you the final part. All
You
right.
can see them.
So
These
these
are
are
our
our
biscuits.
biscuits. They lifted up a lot in the oven, and they have some like fun craggly bits. So they rose a lot in the oven, so there's a whole bunch of like little craggly bits. So they'll be really good for dipping into gravy and kind of sopping up all of your Thanksgiving drippings. So we'll move on to the next item, which is our roasted vegetables. Those will go into the oven. We started chopping those up while these were inside. And then we'll show everything together at the end again as well.
Right.
The next thing that we'll move on to is just prepping some veggies for some good roasted veggies for your Thanksgiving
Sounds good.
table. All right.
All right.
All right, so now we have out our vegetables that we're going to do. So we chose butternut squash and Brussels sprouts, but you could choose any fresh vegetables that you like. We're just going to be baking these in the oven, a pretty hot oven, so we're going to put it in the same 425-degree oven with the biscuits for about 30 to 40 minutes, since these are a more like hefty vegetable. If you're using like a broccoli or a string bean or something like that, you can cook it for less time, just until the vegetables are tender and how you like them. But you can see Austin is peeling the butternut squash, which I highly recommend because I have definitely almost cut off my fingers trying to get into a butternut squash before. And then for me, I just rinsed these Brussels sprouts, and I'm gonna cut off the little end and then cut it in half. Just like that. So you take your little baby cabbages and you cut them in half, and then we'll prep all of this and then show you how we dress them up for the oven.
All right. With butternut squash, I like to cut on both ends first. So then I have just this like little butternut blob thing, and then I'll cut it in half, straight down the middle, so that I can stand it upright and cut it in half 2 more times. It's going to make it super easy to not only dice it, but also clean out this yucky inside that we totally don't need.
It's kind of like a pumpkin.
It's gorgeous. This is just a long pumpkin. Really pumpkin flavored. But what I'm doing is just taking a spoon to the inside to get all that pith and seed out. It actually smells like a pumpkin too.
Yeah, when it's raw.
Yeah.
I love you.
So, how do we like to prepare our Brussels sprouts and vegetables after we're done chopping them?
A lot of the time we'll just use olive oil and salt and pepper and fresh garlic, but sometimes using steak seasoning is really good. If you're like doing a nice grilled chicken dish, if it's not Thanksgiving. But I think like doing a simple salt and pepper, olive oil, garlic is good, because then you just kind of have a nice vegetable on the side to kind of go with all of your other flavors that are going on. There's not too much overpowering. Okay, so we have all of our prepped veggies, and then we're going to put them into a Ziploc bag to help kind of marinate them, if you will.
Putting it in a Ziploc bag is going to help us coat every vegetable in just the right amount of oil. Not use too much or too little. Perfect.
Get those little leaves.
That's good.
We like doing, if any leaves fall off of your Brussels sprouts too, we really like keeping them on the pan because they'll turn into these little crispy chips and they're very, very delicious.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and start by putting some olive oil in. We're going to go good glove and a half. And I like to dump out excess oil over the sink. It's better to have too much in there so that everything gets coated than not enough, and it might burn. So, I'm going to seal this up. Give it a little shake, shake, shake. And you can tell if you have enough oil, if it pools at the bottom. So, see how I have like a little pool going on right there?
Yeah.
That means that all my veggies are coated in oil, and I can strain some excess off. So, we're going to do just a little sprinkling of salt. You can always add more.
That looked like about a half tablespoon. Not tablespoon. That looked like about a half teaspoon.
And about the same amount of pepper. Even though I love black pepper, I know some people aren't the biggest fan. Well, we have our minced garlic here. I usually put about a clove or 2 cloves of fresh garlic, and that's about what that is, minced garlic, like a half of a teaspoon.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do the same thing we did before. Just give it a big old shaky stir. This is just to make sure all of our veggies are evenly coated and all that delicious stuff that we have. Perfect. And I think I'll even add some more salt and pepper on top when it's on the pan. So, what I'm going to do is just kind of hold it like this so that I can let the oil out, but not the vegetables. Do it over the sink, of course. So, we have our veggies on here. Perfect. Ta-da. Give them a little rustle so that they're nice and even. You can even, if you want your Brussels sprouts to turn out a lot better, flip them all over so that the cut side is down. We're just going to give a liberal sprinkling of black pepper. This way you can look at all the veggies to make sure some are getting more. There we go. And we're just going to flip some of these over. All the little Brussels sprouts. Your fingers are going to get a little oily. Salt and pepper. Not salt and pepper. Soap and water. No problem. You can edit that out, right? Movie magic?
Yeah, I
Alright,
can
cool.
edit that out.
All right. And so this,
I'll probably leave it in though.
you better not. This pan is now ready for the oven. You want to make sure that everything's about the even level.
Yep.
And then that's perfect.
All right, and then this is going to go into the same 425-degree oven. So we haven't changed the temperature of our oven at all. And we're going to put these ones on the top rack of our oven. And then our green bean casserole that we're going to prep next is going to also go into the same oven together.
I'm making a green bean casserole. I have green beans and mushrooms, which I've already chopped up. But I wanted to show you guys at home how we do it in our kitchen. So the recipe actually calls for us to cut into half-inch slices for our mushrooms. So we're going to halve it, and then we're going to do little thin slices off this side. And that'll give us a bunch of thin little slices.
And this is Alton Brown's homemade green bean casserole recipe, and we'll also leave that linked down below in the description. So we have chopped up on the side about 12 ounces of mushrooms, and then we have a pound of green beans.
Yes.
We're not just cooking one green bean and one mushroom.
If only. That would be delicious.
That would feed all of us.
But for the green beans, to prepare them for cooking, we cut off both sides. And we're just going to cut it into little manageable bite-sized pieces. And then we're going to go ahead and rinse these off so that we can boil them.
Yep.
And then dip them in ice water so they stop cooking.
Yes.
And then we're going to saute our mushrooms in some butter, add a little bit of flour, add a little bit of milk and chicken broth to make us a roux.
Sweet.
Okay.
All right, and then we'll go over to the stovetop, and I'll show you guys how we do this as well.
Here we have our bubbling, boiling water, our cauldron of trouble, if you will, on this Halloween night. That we're just going to bring it to a boil. It's about a gallon of water. We're going to add a little bit of salt, just to give it that little flavor for our green beans that we're going to toss in when it's boiling. This pan, this saucepan right here, what we're going to do with this is we're going to put about 2 tablespoons of butter. If you have made our biscuits, you would know that you have about 2 tablespoons left over from that recipe. So this is a perfect follow-up dish. So I added the mushrooms in here. You can see that I gave them a nice big stir, and that just puts everything in butter, which is exactly what we want for this recipe.
Yes.
Right, so we're just going to keep cooking these until they give up a lot of their water, or until you start to see a little bit of a sear on them. That means that they're cooking. You'll also see that they'll go down in size, like it's already half the pot, and it was almost full when I started. It's crazy. We have our green beans boiling over here. Then in just a second, I'm going to need to prep a little ice bath for them. Let's do that right now. So we have our ice water here. That's for our green beans to go in after they're done swimming. Ooh, these mushrooms, they are smelling nice and umami. That's what the cool kids are calling the meaty flavor nowadays. So now that this is, it's starting to give up its moisture. If you look, you can see it's a little wet on the outside, and there's a little bit of liquid at the bottom. That'll bubble off and just turn into straight flavor. So let's add a little bit of pepper. I think the recipe calls for about 1/2 teaspoon, and the same amount of salt. And then I think I'm going to add, I think it called for about 2 cloves of freshly minced garlic. So this time, what we're just going to do is use our pre-minced garlic. I'll use about maybe 3/4 teaspoon. Give that a nice big stir. Ooh, now that is smelling really delicious. No kidding. Smell that? Dude, look at it go.
Smells pretty awesome.
All right, we have officially been notified by the creator of this video that this smells good. Stop. Hey, what's that sound? Our green beans are ready. Right, so we're just going to try and strain them all out nice and easy. And just plop them in the ice water so that they immediately stop cooking. This process is called blanching, and will allow them to keep a lot of their snap and natural flavor when we have them in a casserole that's been baking forever. All right, so let me finish this off by taking it over to the sink. These are our green beans for our green bean casserole. And we're just going to strain off all that ice water to get our green beans. All right, so, oh my goodness, this is really looking pretty wet, but that's awesome. It'll all bubble off and turn into flavor. So it's about here. We're going to want to add our nutmeg. I don't think it calls for a lot. Maybe, let's just go easy with it. A couple taps. Oh, it looks like it's about reduced to 1/3 of its original size, which is exactly perfect. To this, we're going to want to add 2 tablespoons of flour. Put it all over the top so that we can stir it in. It'll sop up that liquid so that we can make a nice, creamy, smooth roux.
What is a roux?
A roux is a French type of sauce that's usually made when butter is combined with flour and then something like chicken stock, or I also have a recipe that it has milk added to it. But basically what it is cooked flour to make a thick, creamy sauce. This sauce has chicken broth and half, a cup of each. So if you can see right in here, what it looks like is a lot of that liquid is now sopped up by the flour, and we're just going to let it cook until it gets a little toasty smelling, like kind of like toasted bread, like toasted flour. That's what it's going to smell like.
Hey everyone, We lost our audio quality here, so this is Kayley coming in the post-production. So in this clip, Austin is adding 1 cup of chicken broth. We used low-sodium chicken broth for this recipe, to the mixture of mushroom and flour, the roux base that he is starting. And he is incorporating that well into the roux mixture so that there are no lumps in the mushrooms and that it starts to form a thicker kind of chicken broth base to this soup. Here's a close-up of him mixing all of that together, and he'll allow this to simmer for about 10 minutes before adding the half and half to make this a creamy cream of mushroom soup.
Alright, so what I think the coolest part about this recipe is it teaches us how to make cream of mushroom soup. Now, once you learn this, you can make this to spice up any recipe that just calls for cream of mushroom soup. You don't have to buy the can, and I know sometimes it requires a little bit of foresight at the grocery store, but I think everyone at the dinner table will thank you.
You're so cute.
I know my wife really loves it when I make things. Alright, so this has been simmering for a little bit. We're just about ready to put in our half and half. Just like that. 1 whole cup. That's the cream of mushroom soup. And this is going to bubble, toil, and trouble for about 5 to 10 minutes until it's nice, thick, and creamy. Alright, so this is just about ready. And we can tell because when we dip a spoon in, it'll coat the back of the spoon. And when you draw a line through it, the line will stay. So this is a perfect thick sauce. You can turn the heat off. I've taken my 1 pound of green beans and mixed them with half of, a 6-ounce container, so about 3 ounces of French fried onions. Just gonna put those in here. Give it a nice big happy stir. Sure everyone gets to know each other. Says hi, how you doing? Long time no see. All right, and that's about ready to go into our casserole dish. We have what looks to be a 9 by 13 or maybe an 8 by 13 casserole dish. 9 by 13, which is exactly perfect for this. We're going to just spoon the whole dang thing in. We have our oven preset to 425 degrees. All right, so that's in there. We can do the rest of our, well, maybe just a thin layer of French fried onions on top, just like that. And we're also going to sprinkle a little bit of panko breadcrumbs just to give it that nice crunch. Well, maybe a little bit more. Ain't hurt nobody. Perfect. All right, give it a little shake so everyone's nicely distributed. We're going to put it in there for 10 to 15 minutes or until it starts to bubble. If you can look right here, it looks like our butternut squashes and our Brussels sprouts have already come out of the oven. We have some nice, beautiful caramelized leaves. What a nice savory crunch. And if you look here, you'll see that our butternut squash has started to almost wilt a bit on the outside. That means it's cooked. Look at that nice caramelization. Yummy. Boy, that ice is fun.
Okay, so this is what all 3 of our different savory Thanksgiving recipes turned out to be. We have our green bean casserole, our roasted veggies, and our biscuits. And they're all going to be very, very delicious. Our next segment we're going to film tomorrow, we're going to be making the 2 pies, a pumpkin pie and an apple pie. And then...
That's it?
That's
I
it!
think we're just about ready to dig into this.
And have some dinner. Good.
Thank you.
All right, so this is Thanksgiving Day 2, and we changed our location. We're now in our kitchen.
The Officer Brown household.
As opposed to my mom's kitchen. So today we will be making our pies. Something that Sam and I mentioned in the first segment of this video is that you can make your pies well in advance and freeze them. With fruit pies, you can make all of the prep work, and before you bake them, you can freeze them and then pop them in the oven for an extra, I would say like 20-30 minutes once, if you're putting them in frozen. And then you'll have a fresh baked pie the day of Thanksgiving, and you could do that work like 2 weeks ahead of time. And then with the pumpkin pie, you can bake it the day that you're making it for prep and then freeze it, and then just either leave it in the fridge to defrost. No, you would want pumpkin pie cold. You want to leave it in the fridge to defrost and then bring it out once everyone's ready to eat dessert.
Exactly.
So, is there anything you would like to say?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think I'm ready to get baking.
All right, so first we're going to make our pumpkin pie, and this is a Pioneer Woman recipe from her Year of Holidays cookbook. So I will leave that linked also in the description down below, but we'll cook along with you and show you how to make this. It's really simple.
All right.
All
Let's
right.
get started.
Yep.
Okay.
So our first step is going to be to preheat our oven to 425. And this is a special pie, so the first 10 minutes, I think, you cook the pie in the 425 oven, and then you drop the temperature down to 350 or
350 degrees
to
Fahrenheit.
350 degrees to then bake it for the rest of the length. But now we're going to put together our pumpkin pie filling.
Yep. All right. So for this recipe, our pumpkin pie, we're going to be using a store-bought, frozen, and then thawed pie crust from Pillsbury. This recipe is really, really simple and easy because just put everything in a bowl, mix it together, and then put everything in the pie crust. So I have 2 eggs that I'm going to put in my bowl. I'm going to add half of a cup of packed brown sugar. And then I have my spice mixture, which is a ½ teaspoon of cinnamon, a ¼ teaspoon of ginger, and a ¼ teaspoon of cloves. That's also going to go right in there. I'm going to give that a little whisk just to let everyone get to know each other. Kind of break up some of those brown sugar clumps while it's pretty wet still. Makes it a little easier later on.
What are you thankful for?
In the vanilla extract, I'm going to add a whole tablespoon of. ½ tablespoon. A whole tablespoon. Okay. Give that a little mix again. And then we can add in our I think it's 14 ounce, 14 ounce container of sweetened condensed milk. Get all that good stuff in there. Delicious. And since it's so sticky, I like to use a little rubber spatula to help it out sometimes. Okay. Now we can measure out 2 cups of our pumpkin puree. See if I can get this one to go easy. There we go. For pumpkin pie, we need our pumpkin. 2 whole cups of this. So, and that's about most of a 29 ounce can, so I think I'll just add it all. Nothing wrong with a little extra pumpkin for a pumpkin pie. Alright, we can add this in. We'll give it a nice swirl together. So you can tell this mixture is going to come out pretty wet. That's because when we bake it, it's going to do a lot of drying. The eggs are going to cook and it's going to give it a custard-like consistency once it's finished. It's also why we're cooking it at such a low temperature, because it goes for 425 for only, I think, 10 minutes, and then back down to 350 for another 30. That's going to give it a lot of that setting that we need. So this mixture looks about ready. You can see it's all the same color everywhere. This is about ready to go into the oven. These, I think this one came in a pack of 2. Very easy, especially since it's a pumpkin pie. We don't have to have a lid on it. We don't have to have the crust on top. We're just going to fill this up with our pumpkin mixture. This is our thawed pie crust. We don't need the top part because it's a pumpkin pie. We're just gonna ease our mixture in there. Oh, that's gonna turn out really nice. Until everything is where it belongs in there. I'd say that's about good. We're gonna give it a little flattening. And our pumpkin pie's ready to bake. Good job. If you made it this far, you got it. Our oven is at 425. I have my timer set for 15 minutes. I'm gonna pop this in the oven very carefully. Remember, it's very wet, very liquidy. Right in the middle, 15 minutes. And that's gonna cook for 15 minutes at 425. We'll lower the temperature to 350. And then it's gonna go for another 40 minutes. And just keep an eye on it, because if the edges get a little burnt, you're going to want to wrap some aluminum foil around the edges. That's really going to help you get that good, cooked, custard-like pie, but not burnt edges. Good job.
Okay, so now we're gonna make our apple pie. So off camera, Austin and I peeled 4 Granny Smith apples, but you can use any kinds of apples for this recipe. We also, I stole lemon juice.
Lemon juice that I keep in the fridge.
I stole some of Austin's lemon juice. So I put a tablespoon and a half in here just so that the apples don't brown while we're making our pie. And then we forgot that we were filming this video. So I already added a half teaspoon of salt. And then now we're going to add a half teaspoon of cinnamon.
Those apples look pretty thinly sliced.
Austin did a great job. And now I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of flour. This is a half tablespoon, so I'll use 6 of these. And by adding the flour, this is how it's going to help the natural pectin in the fruit. This is going to help the natural pectin in the fruit kind of gel in our pie.
Mm-hmm. Gelatinize. We're going to create a thick sauce.
You're so funny.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that is our 2 tablespoons of flour. Now we're going to add 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And then with the handy dandy rubber spatula, we'll just mix all of this together. And when you think you got everything as incorporated as you can with the spatula, I still have some stuff at the bottom, so I'm just going to use my hands. Hands are the best tools in the kitchen.
Hands can give thumbs up.
Hands can give thumbs up. But they're attached to your body. They're free. So, you know, use your hands.
So
And you can kind of see that this is already coming together with the apple juice to kind of create a future sauce for our pie. Oh, there's a really cinnamony one, so I'm going to try and rub it on some of the other apples. All right, so this is all ready for us. So I'm going to set this aside, and then I will make our pie crust. So for our crust, this is my mom's crust recipe, and she actually uses a hot water crust for her apple pie. Hot water crust is traditionally used for savory pies, but I really like my mom's crust, so this is the one that we're going to do. It's really simple. We start with 2 cups of flour, which I've already poured into our bowl. And then we will go for a teaspoon of salt. And this is a half teaspoon, so I'm going to go for 2 of these. Two-thirds of a cup of oil. I'm using vegetable oil for this. And then 1/2 cup of boiling water. We just heated ours in our kettle because we don't have a microwave. But you can totally, if you have one of these glass Pyrex, you can fill it up to 1/2 cup and boil it in the microwave, and then you're all okay. Then we'll pour that in. Then we'll pour that in and we'll give it a good mix.
All right.
All right, so we had a pit stop from my mom, so we had to stop recording. But I mixed all of that together and now it has formed a dough. And we don't have to chill this at all. It's ready to be rolled out, so we can go ahead and do that. And I actually might swap with Austin because he's better at rolling things out.
All right, sounds good.
Okay.
So I have my hot water crust here. This makes two, one for the top and one for the bottom. So we're just gonna separate it for now. This is for later. And this will do for the bottom. So what I want to do is get it to a nice ball. Actually think I need a little more flour just to get it not to stick anymore. Put that on here too. Just very lightly expand the dough. Very tender dough. Good job. So we have our bottom half all rolled out. We're just going to roll out our top half now. Just kind of gently getting it to go into a square or circle shape. Make it a little thinner.
How thin are you making it?
I'm making it, not really thinking about thick or thinness. I'm just trying to get it about the size of my tin. That looks about right. So, we can get our filling. Our filling's going to go straight in, just like that. Nice. All of that yummy stuff in there. Alright. Okay, so we're gonna add about a quarter of a stick of butter. I think the actual recipe calls for like 2 tablespoons. We're just gonna make sure it's evenly spread out within the pie. Just like that. It's gonna give us a nice flavorful sauce. Alright. So now we can take our crust. We're going to roll it back up onto the rolling pin. Like that. So that we could ever so gently roll it back over the top here. Cool. And then...
And now we'll just go around and... So we're just going to cut off the excess pastry.
Nice.
So we took off the excess and then now I'm just going to use my thumb and my fingers to just make a little pie crust. And this will seal up the edges together so that nothing leaks out of our pie. And it also gives us that cute little kind of fluted look. And then our last step is to just add a couple little vents so that the pie doesn't puff up too much when it bakes, because the crust will kind of swell if there's too much air that gets in there, and then you'll have a big gap in your pie crust. It kind of makes your pie, if you don't add vents, it makes your pie look like kind of like cartoon pies that are
With the
domed
bumps.
on the top, and that's not what we're going for. So you want to make sure that there's just some little air vents in your pie. Our oven is set to 450, and how long is it going to go in for, Austin?
I think it's going to go in there for about 40 to 50 minutes.
Alrighty, and we're about to go head over to dinner, but I will put in some pictures of what our final pies look like. Awesome,
job.
thanks everybody!
Okay, those were great recipes.
I know.
Amazing.
And it, let me tell you, it was super tasty.
Yes.
So this was like our Thanksgiving, run through for
Yeah,
both
this
of
is
us.
practice Thanksgiving.
Right. Very good.
Oh.
Practice Thanksgiving is almost as good as regular Thanksgiving. So one thing I want to talk about, because I have a friend who is vegetarian, is how can I make stuff for my vegetarian friends? For most of us, it seems like it's a daunting task because we don't realize how vegetarian we sometimes eat. Most vegetarians, and my friend included, will eat dairy, so a lot of things are already vegetarian. Your mashed potatoes, unless for some reason you put chicken stuff in your mashed potatoes, which if you're dairy free is a way to do your mashed potatoes. So your mashed potatoes are already, a lot of your vegetable sides are already, unless you put bacon in them.
Yeah.
Gravies, make a miso gravy. You can use the same roux that you saw in my demonstration, and I use either white or red miso and a mushroom stock to make mine for my friend. You can make your stuffing easily vegetarian. I use vegetable stock. I actually make 2 different ones, a small one for her and then the regular one. And I just use vegetable stock. And if you're looking for like a main protein, you can always buy a tofurkey.
Yeah.
They're actually not that bad. But I also sometimes will just buy a really firm tofu and marinate it in the same spices that I'm using on my turkey. So it's really easy to make stuff for your vegetarian friends. And a lot of times they'll bring their own stuff too. So vegan, I can't speak for. Asking them would be the best. But a lot of things are also already vegan, like, you know, squash and Brussels sprouts and stuff when you use olive oil instead of butter. So don't forget your vegetarian friends. And then our favorite part, leftovers.
What do we do with all of the leftovers?
I eat them.
Yes.
But my favorite thing was always the Thanksgiving sandwich. And if you watch Friends, like in the mid 2000s, 90s, 2000s, oh my god, I feel old. There was an episode where Ross gets really upset because someone eats his Thanksgiving leftover sandwich. So I do something similar, only I make an open-faced kind of hot sandwich where I use either the leftover rolls or I use homemade bread because homemade bread is good. And then I pile everything on top of it and cover it with gravy. It's really good. I know it sounds horrible and you will need to sleep after it. But you can also do the same thing in a casserole dish if you're serving multiple people.
I also really like turkey noodle soup if you have a whole bunch of leftover turkey. You can repurpose a lot of different things so that maybe you're not eating Thanksgiving every day for the next 2 weeks.
Right.
You can think about different ways to, maybe I'll use these leftover potatoes as a side to a different dinner this week.
Right.
Or thinking about other creative ways to eat up all those leftovers without them going bad. That doesn't mean you have to eat the same dinner every night.
Right.
But also, a lot of people really love having Thanksgiving dinner sandwiches. That's their favorite part of Thanksgiving.
Right.
So
That's me.
so you can look forward to eating that sandwich every day.
Yeah, don't throw your turkey carcass away. You can throw it in a stock pot or an Instapot or even a crock pot with aromatics, so like celery, carrots, onions, and then you put in water, or you can add chicken stock or something like that so that you get more flavor. And then you just let it simmer for a while, and there you have your turkey broth for your turkey noodle soup. And then you can freeze all that stuff too. So you can freeze your leftover stuffing. You can freeze your leftover mashed potatoes so that, you're not eating them every day. But you can space them out over a couple weeks or a month. And that is Thanksgiving. And now we need a nap. Because that's what you always have to do after Thanksgiving is take a nap. Between the cooking and all of the carbs.
All right, everybody. So next month's How Not to Burn Toast is going to be on Christmas cookies. So we'll show you some of our favorite Christmas cookie recipes and leave some extra fun tidbits. But definitely, if you are making Thanksgiving for the first time, check the links in the description down below because there's a lot of helpful tips that we found for you that can help smooth things over and make it a lot easier for you as you go about your Thanksgiving day.
Yeah, and if you do use use some of our recipes, or even if you don't, but you watch this video, you know, you can tweet, Facebook, Instagram us, and show us what you made for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different recipes out there. These are just a couple. I mean, I make different ones every year just to try some new things. So we hope that you enjoyed this, and we hope you join us again next month. See ya. Bye, everybody. So Spire Talk.